subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Perfect. Audio is clear, sir?
Audio absolutely clear. If you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Yeah, my side is. This is good platform. I didn't know about this.
अरे सर ये थोड़ा सिंपल हो जाता है और इसमें क्या है, there is no disturbance. Basically, you know, we can.
Actually, I can see you I hear you very clearly.
Yeah, and
there is no much nothing.
that's very important क्योंकि normally होता ये है कि इतने disturbances हो जाते हैं Facebook में कि you know it's very difficult to hear two people because
Correct.
yes, a lot of people want to comment, ask questions, seek clarifications, but it's important that you know the main point is put across first before we start interjecting. Everyone loves Arnav, so everyone tries to play Arnav nowadays. कि यार 30 seconds से ज़्यादा बात नहीं करने देंगे.
बात ही नहीं करने दूंगा.
But you know, we are trying our level best to ensure that people who know what the entire subject matter is, get to explain to people. Because very honestly, in today's times, other than the jingoistic talks which happen on TV, there is no real matter. There is no content as such which people
in any which case, it's more of a debate to say कि you're on which side. It's not more of a
it's not about information. It is only about choosing sides.
Yeah, it has become one of that these days.
Yeah, one of my school friend was telling me yesterday कि यार TV debates में तो खाली कबड्डी चलता है. मतलब चलता रहता है.
No, it all depends on the channel also. I go on these Hindi channels. They are a little more patient. They hear you out.
Yes.
Then there are channels like India Today where everybody is heard. मतलब whichever your view may be, plus minus whatever, but at least your part nobody is interjecting. Then you upscale 2 times now where everybody talks, but the second time you talk there are a lot of interjections. And then you come to Republic where it starts with a bang.
He's on a league of his own.
हाँ, तो उस दिन मैं अर्नब को विश किया बर्थडे तो बोलता है सर नो आई वुड लाइक यू टू कम ऑन माय चैनल आल्सो. So I didn't tell him a yes or no. मैंने कहा अर्नब ऐसा है कि you know I just called to wish you today. So that offer which you are giving is fine. I'm okay to go with your channel. But ठीक है उतना ही था उस दिन. But thereafter he is not called, so I also not called him.
नहीं, you know, I go on these Lok Sabha panels. वहाँ पे तो they are very clear. They, you know, it's very old school kind of place where you are at least allowed to speak.
And allowed to speak freely for your time, and the next person speaks. Depending on half an hour, 1 hour, whatever show is, people are generally comfortable talking.
Yes.
So you're not looking for an opportunity to blutter.
नहीं यहाँ तो मतलब it's only a TRP game. मतलब this is not about decimation of news or anything. It's purely TRP. मतलब it's not media. It is basically a show, TV show.
Correct.
It's a current affairs TV show.
Yeah. Current affairs, not even a show. It's a rapid fire buzzer round kind of a thing. जिसने बोल दिया आंसर वो बोल दिया बाकी जो नहीं बोल पाया he's lost the battle today.
Yeah.
Let me know whenever you want to start. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. So if you're free, we can start.
Yeah, please.
So good afternoon to you and good afternoon to everyone who will watch this at whatever time of the day. But this is a good afternoon because we have not just a colonel, but we also have a strategist. We also have someone who analyzes and is someone who is in a position to speak with authority on military affairs and strategies. In the last few days at Indo-Analytics, we have made an attempt to get expert opinions on what the Indo-China face-off is all about. We have had the good fortune of having Lieutenant General P.S. Mehta, we had Lieutenant General Narasimhan, we had the journalistic point of view or the political point of view from Mr. Rajagopalan. He's an extremely senior journalist. That's the military and the journalistic perspective. But this is slightly unique with Colonel Rohit Dev because, by the way, I like your nickname. I love the nickname RDX. I know the
Thank
reason,
you.
but I will not
Thank you,
say it
Bharat ji.
out. Uh, and the entire idea behind this endeavor of Indo-Analytics was for people to understand what this entire face-off is all about. Is it about trying to put a cover on the pandemic which originated in China? Was it about a geopolitical struggle for power? Or is it just a very localized territorial dispute between two nations over their understanding of where the line is of their territory? So that was our entire concept of wanting to do this. And yes, once we do the entire series, we would be doing a complete roundtable of all the experts uh, to understand if there is any divergent views. Because till now, we have kind of understood that everyone agrees that, you know, more or less like 90%, they are in agreement of what the issue is and what the problem we face, not just domestically but internationally is, and the way forward. Uh, I am not going to ask you any question. I have given you the platform for you to explain to everyone, including me, beginning with me, because uh, I'm just a student of history, and we're just trying to learn what is the issue and what is the way forward and what is the strategic aspect of the entire face-off. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything has got some meaning. It's got a reason. It's planned. Even unforced errors sometimes give you very good dividends. So the platform is yours, and I'm sure people who are very eager to understand from the military strategic point of view. Uh, so it's over to you.
Thank you, Bharat ji, for having me on your
All right.
show. And let me begin with the aspect of a little bit of history and what the toil in the Chinese mind has been. And I will not spend much time there. I'll come back to the present very quickly. But let me just give you a brief there. China, if you have gone through the grand strategy which they developed a couple of decades ago, and they had two things which had to go in simultaneously. The first was uninhibited and a rapid surge in the economic prowess. And for that, it wanted openness in markets to be able to reach Eurasia, to be able to reach Europe, to be able to reach Americas and Asia. And it went on to go on to various world bodies. And given the advantage it had to be on the UN permanent seat from the beginning, it has in other world forums of WTO and including the recent WHO, what has been talked about, it has been able to seed itself well in the economic realm. And as it had the ambition to grow in the economic sphere, it also nurtured a military ambition to be able to cope up with the United States as a target country. So it is to be in goody two shoes kind of atmosphere initially, get all the economic leverages onto your side, get businesses. And being a communist country, it was able to get labor and services very cheap. And these two things ensured that the manufacturing shifted to China, the services sector shifted to China. And that is why you find most of the servers, most of the services oriented industries are actually located in China. And over the last about 10, 12 years, the surge of manufacturing in China has been huge. Initially, it had some kind of a competition with even littoral states like Taiwan, maybe Korea, and such like states where it was cheaper. But China gained a lot because it gave the SOPs the maximum to the world community to come and invest. And as that happened, China grew economically and it was able to invest in other countries globally. If you go and do a little deep dive into this aspect I'm talking about, China is on the verge of owning a few African states and some South Asian states currently with the money power, put into those countries. So strategically, if you see its string of pearls or the BRI initiative, it has thought about the countries first, whom to address, whom to ally with, whom to give largies in terms of loans and economic benefits today, and to be able to shape their geopolitical decisions tomorrow. So it's a long stretch geopolitical economic strategy, and diplomacy and economic power, and to the tune of heavy bribery and corruption has been the norm in the Chinese mindset to get it done. And rest everything within China comes very cheap. It is no cost. It's a communist state. The CPC says, the others do it. And there's a propaganda machinery which ensures that the people are absolutely behind the party. So with such kind of it's something like a fiefdom. So it's a fiefdom working at a political level internally, and it's a aura working outwards. So both have combined, gotten China the economic edge it sought. The planning initially was for the grand strategy to develop by 2030. But the surge it got economically, it now thinks that it has actually tried to come at level with US and other countries. That's the thought there. That's the way they have devalued their currency initially to gain everything else. And now they are at a very a good pedestal to dictate terms in the economic and trade world. The military part also has gone up in the last about a decade, 12 years, because of the economic surge. So they must have decided that of the economic benefits we reap from the world, we will grow our infrastructure, whatever is to be shown to people internally, and also a portion will be apportioned to the military aspect. So since you made windfall gains in the last decade plus, you've been able to attribute more of that financial accrual towards the military sphere. And then starts the unfinished business. China was to, still has to, it may be a little premature, time regaining all the littoral states it thinks are his, all the territories it wants to go and occupy in South China Sea, East China Sea, or it be its tussle against Hong Kong and Taiwan currently, and also the unfinished business of Tibet itself. And while you look at Tibet, you also must also look geographically that the BRI initiative going towards Eurasia, which goes a little north of the LAC which we have, and also the CPEC which comes into that corridor coming into Pakistan, which just about manages to go across the prominent Siachen glaciers, reach, are the two economic factors which are driving engagement with these neighboring states of our country. So Pakistan was always in the pocket. Then you had Doklam. Now Doklam is a tri-junction with us and Bhutan included. So they tried something there. Whatever they succeeded or not succeeded is not part of today's deliberation. But Bhutan is totally for the Indian nation. So China does not see any headway currently in Bhutan to be able to put shops there and gain the advantage and leverage it. Then we come down to Dipu, is again a tri-junction where it's with Myanmar. So whatever are the relations with China are not so friendly. The fourth is Lipu Lake, which is next to a tri-junction with Nepal and India. Now these four per se, when you start from Siachen and coming down and going towards the Myanmar Dipu Pass, you find that these strategic dominations by China give it a territorial elbow space against India. So now you imagine sitting on a table and eating. There are various people who have eating habits. So a British will put, half his wrist on the table and, eat like that. A person like me may put maybe a part of my arm. But then there are people who actually, can put the elbow on the table and also eat. So imagine China to be like that, and looking from north towards the south, when it looks at India, it wants to nudge the two elbows on the east and west of India. And the moment he does that, the pressure points along the borders are these four strategic tri-junctions and the LAC which then runs alongside these landmarks. So if you actually go into, and I will suggest to all the viewers that there is an annual report presented to the Congress in the United States on China. It's a white paper kind of a thing on China. I've been reading it from 2003 onwards. And it gives a very in-depth analysis of what is the Chinese mindset. And when you see this term which I use as elbow space, China will ensure that elbow space is applicable both for economic growth, economic leverage, more to say, because these are poorer states than compared to China, and also attain military edge against a rival which is growing in the Asian or the South Asian continent, and also happens to be competing for a global role and acknowledgement and a place in the UN or other world bodies. That's India. So when China sees us, while it has been able to be quiet, to be humble, to be absolutely pliant in the economic realm to get all the economic advantages from Europe and Americas for the last 2 odd decades, it doesn't want to yield that advantage to India. Because in its growth story, from where it has risen from a level of 10% and come up to 90% of economic advantage of the US, it sees India to rise a little faster. Not only because we are going to be a more populous nation than China currently, if we are to be that, and also because of the youth in our country, which our Prime Minister keeps stressing upon. So huge potential. So when you go to US, who are the people competing in the services sector while in the US? It was mostly India for a long time, apart from other nations, but China has started to make headway. Going into the future, if China will, have that same advantage, I'm a little skeptical because of the current US administration. They're going to lose more than us. So whether it's H1B1 kind of a movement to US, I think China will lose more and China will not be trusted. So India has to be trusted. So with this backdrop, if you come back, and now I will draw you down straight to the Tibetan plateau. Tibet, in whatever be the geopolitical assessment of our country and our leaders and political realm, I will not comment on that. But let me tell you the Chinese angle. The Chinese angle always has been to usurp the complete Tibetan region. So it's a hegemon which will take Tibet unless the world takes notice. And the world has not taken adequate notice for many decades now. So once you see the plateau, now you see how he has developed the plateau. Initially, he had some military establishments just to take care of the Tibetan locals. And whatever happened there in terms of genocide and demographic change, that the world has heard. On the Western side, the Uyghur problem is a different problem. So that's a different debate by itself. China has started to develop infrastructure in the last about three decades or less, and in a very structured format. I will tell you when I used to be as a brigade major of a formation with the LSC, and that was 2006, 7, 8. And at that time, I could foresee this development of infrastructure happening in a bigger way than what my peers or even my seniors till the army headquarters at that time could actually see through. And here I will narrate an incident before I go back to the Chinese build-up. And since I've touched this topic, so I found transgressions into Barahoti that time to be quite normal. Before me, for nearly 6-7 years of situational reports, CITRES, which you call them, they all used to say that, okay, these are regular routine transgressions. It was taken as such. Why is it so? It is because of our dilly-dallying a decision-making, not being able to make a forceful commitment towards resolution of border dispute and get China on table. Now, since the hegemon has got a tendency to create elbow spaces, the corollary logic remains, it is not interested to resolve border disputes, and especially with those countries where it has got an edge. What is the edge? It is the economic edge. It is the edge to redefine its military much in a sharper method and a faster method. And it's also the edge it accrues because of the terrain. Terrain is very important. While India has to climb from, if I say very bluntly, from New Delhi and climb up to Ladakh in terms of altitude, he's already coming from a higher altitude on the plateau and then coming to the watershed. So that's a advantage it has to build up anything, whether it's infrastructure, civil nature or military nature. So while I saw this transgression happening, for the first time in that particular tenure, transgressions happened on other passes along the watershed going towards Nepal. And in between that, Tri-Junction and Barahoti. And I told my patrol, which was there from ITBP and Army that time, a joint patrol, we started a process of sending joint patrols till the watershed. And we changed routes that time. So I said, okay, why don't you go across the watershed since you see nobody from your binoculars? You pick up whatever you are seeing. They saw some kind of a, burnt wood as a campfire kind of a thing. So there they found horse hoof marks of horses. So they termed it as yak. So when I got the pictures back when they came back with the patrol, it was not yak, it was horses. So obviously horseback Chinese 2006-7. So I raised in a sitrep to say, okay, I have got a hunch that they have their deployment closer to the watershed now, contrary to our belief that they come in motor vehicles from Dapazong and Gompa areas, which are about 120 kilometers where currently the G219 goes straight up along the plateau. So I said they're not coming from there. In summers, they come and camp forward. So they have semi-permanent camps which are established closer to the watershed. And my hunch was that they may be developing a kacha or a motorable track along the watershed on the other side. And anyway, to cut it short, I got walloped from army headquarters to my own headquarters in Central Command and UB area. And I took it upon myself to do something which was that time a little unauthorized. So I bid for my time. And next year, when Bharahoti assessment is done by the civil administration, it's a regular feature there. So I sent in a couple of boys of the Indian forces with a lot of material, spotter scope, and everything else on my own. I kept my boss generally in the know, but not any other headquarters. And they went and came back after 15 days. They came with beautiful pictures of semi-permanent, similar structures which you see in Pagangso and such like areas and those rear areas of Galwan today. There then, I'm talking 7-8. And contrary to my motorable Kacha road, there was a 300-meter Pakka road. And Kacha road laning had been done for a little more time. The spotter scope could not pick up because there was a ridge beyond that. So I didn't permit them to go beyond that area. So they came back and gave me this report. So why I'm bringing this out is, China has been always focused to completely annex Tibet. It's a given. Our political dilemmas have made it emboldened, so to say. So it is continuing. Now, what is the way it is happening in the last 3-4 years is more important. We had skirmish in 62. We had a small battle at Nathula and Chola in 67. And we have had cases in history where we have ceded lands uncontested because China came there and made something and we came to know a little later itself. So that's more of a political debate, and I don't know how surprisingly these days. And people are talking about what has we lost then and how much we'll lose now and in the future. So we will continue to lose in case we are not confident of what we are doing. And that gets me to the point that China in the last 3 years, and I will now come to a micro level of the Doklam issue and beyond.
Yes.
And if you go to my post, and you will find, while we were all patting our backs in the political realm, military realm, geostrategical realm, standing up to a friend, Bhutan, everything happened. I was very happy for that. But I had my critique also, and it is there on a post on a 2017 Facebook post, which I have quoted on my social media platforms now as well. And I said, China is going to remember it. And this is just a start point. It is going to get more aggressive in the years to come. And we should do something about it. I'm quite sure the political realm and the military realm have done something about it. But you must understand, Bharat, that we have our own limitations. In a population of 1.3 billion, there is a set GDP which is available. There's a set percentage of that which can go to military. So even if I want the moon today, and that moon costs me 30% of my GDP, and if I say 30% for 2 years, I'll be done, it's still not possible with kind of other issues of hunger, jobs, infrastructure development, Digital India, Make in India, other initiatives you have. You can't cope up. So there are many naysayers, and you'll find even veterans like us who come on TV and say government has reduced GDP and all that. So keep it for another day. But suffice to say that we can't bolster our infrastructure and military infrastructure requirements along the LAC because we have been behind by more than 3 decades. So to compete with 3 decades, at least. And thanks for correcting me, because I write that word there, three decades plus myself. So I can't say 3 decades, it is plus. So coming to Doklam. Post Doklam, what did you see, Bharat? That in, I think, July, if I'm not wrong, China took a concerted decision that enough is enough, and now let me merge Tibet fully. So that surge started in 2018 as per the thought process and strategic level implementation. And in that, what China did, it merged the Chengdu region, which was the eastern region, and Langzhou in Tibet, and made one command, which some call it Western Command, some call it Tibetan Command, whichever we want to call it, it is a name. But then what it did was, it got in the last 1.5-2 years, lots of air defense, loss of air assets, loss of ground assets, and loss of surveillance assets, which are capable to strike anywhere on the plateau. All right. So in their development of infrastructure over the last 2.5 decades, they have got the Kangai Tibet railway line coming from mainland China, and as close as to the area of Shigatse, Lhasa, and the last station I think is Yangdong, and it must be developing still. And this railway line doesn't come directly from mainland. It comes along the other provinces and the military regions of Xiang, Chengdu, and other regions. So what it does is the major garrisons which are on the plateau itself, on the eastern side of China, trying to be on a quick mobilization kind of a order for Taiwan, Hong Kong, South China Sea, now get that oxygen to come even to the western part and along the LAC with India at short notice. China also developed air bases. Most of them are in high altitude. Ningxi is the only airport which is military use, which is less than 3,000 meters, where troops can land, get acclimatized, and then keep going up. Thereafter, they have at Lhasa, they have at Shigatse, they have at Negari Gungsa, and they have got a tremendous amount of infrastructure which has come in there by 2012-13 itself, but towards the east, oriented towards all the campaigns they planned to kill the issue of Taiwan, which is currently burning. So they saw it coming. Hong Kong was also going under that, kind of a lease period off. And then you had the South China Sea. They also developed this G219 and other super highways going right across the plateau. So they built this advantage. And beyond 2017 Doklam, they've also moved some bases ahead. And how they constructing? They're constructing on the garb of constructing civil infrastructure along the various surface communication lines and in the Tibetan plateau. And co-locating with them, they are making these small bases for the military. Even this civil infrastructure is actually for military deployment in the summers to be able to address the norms of patrolling and making their troops a little more agile and comfortable along the LAC. So as per that, they developed. In the 90s, they also developed infrastructure and the road coming to Pagangso today. It was made there. So that road came up. Similarly, they have built up infrastructure about 10-15 kilometers away from Galwan. And that structure which you see on television today, which is about 7 kilometers away, that also has come up in the last 3 to 4 years. It was not there in the years of 2016-17. So that way, if you can appreciate, they are building these co-joint military civil infrastructure coming out from the surface communication roadheads and railheads and airheads towards the plateau. And this all is not blacktop roads per se, because they don't have to make a blacktop. It's a running plateau. You can just make a track, but it's much easier to communicate. But the alignments and everything has been given. And along these surface communication, you have military bases coming up, which, Bharat, in the years to come will grow more rapidly if it goes ahead.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.